invite you to take your seats so we can begin. Yes.
Okay, my dear. I have.
Got to put your
I
name.
know. So.
Thank you. The meeting is called to order. Good morning, distinguished colleagues. Having confirmed the quorum by the Secretariat, I am pleased to declare open this regular meeting of the Permanent Council, convened to consider items contained in the order of business, document CP/OD 2598/26, which is hereby submitted for the Council's consideration. There being no observations, we'll proceed to adopt the agenda. Adopt it. Before proceeding, I would like to take a moment on behalf of the Permanent Council to recognize the important work carried out by the Assistant Secretary General and her team, particularly the Department of Conference and Meetings Management, in implementing the new conference system in this emblematic room. This important and much needed upgrade reflects the Assistant Secretary General's commitment, together with her team, to continuously strengthen the facilities and technical support available to the political bodies of our organization, thereby contributing to the more effective conduct of our meetings. On the item or the business, I will yield the floor to the Assistant Secretary General, who will provide the Council with further details regarding this new system. However, I did not want to proceed without first formally recognizing this important achievement and expressing our appreciation for all those whose dedication and hard work made its implementation possible. I would like also to take this opportunity, on behalf of the Permanent Council, to extend our congratulations to President Keiko Fujimori on her assumption of the office as President of the Republic of Peru. We convey our best wishes to President Fujimori for every success in the fulfillment of her important responsibilities and for the continued well-being and prosperity of the Peruvian people. Allow me as well to extend the Permanent Council's warm congratulations to the following member states as they celebrate their national holidays: Peru on July 28th, Bolivia and Jamaica, whose national holidays will be observed tomorrow, August 6th, and Ecuador on August 10th. In addition, I would like to extend our greetings to the countries of the Commonwealth on the occasion of Emancipation Day, observed on August 1. On behalf of the Permanent Council, I extend our best wishes to all those nations with the hope that these celebrations are marked by peace, stability, and sustainable development as they honor their unique identities, rich cultural heritage, and the aspirations of their peoples. As the next item on the order of business, and in accordance with the request submitted by the delegation of Honduras, in its capacity as the chair of the 9th meeting of the National Authorities on Trafficking in Persons, we will proceed with the commemoration of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, observed on July 30. This commemoration is conducted in accordance with Article 46b of the Rules of Procedure. In this regard, I invite interested delegates to submit their written statements to the Secretariat of the Permanent Council no later than today for their due incorporation into the corresponding record. To begin this commemoration, I am pleased to welcome and give the floor to Mr. Carlos Perez, Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice Officer of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Mr. Perez, welcome to the OAS Permanent Council. You have the floor for up to 7 minutes.
Muy buenos días. Muchísimas gracias.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting the UNODC to participate here. Excellency, Chair of the Permanent Council, permanent representatives, members of PRET and CORETI as regional spaces for coordination. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to address you on behalf of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in the context of the commemoration of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Trafficking of persons is one of the most serious manifestations of transnational organized crime and one of the most serious undermining of human dignity. It deprives people of their liberty, exploits their vulnerability, and creates enormous illicit profits for criminal organizations that operate beyond national borders. That's why the 30th of July, the international community joined together to reaffirm its commitment against this scourge. And trafficking against persons was established by the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 68-192 on December of 2013 and recognized the importance of promoting protection of victims and strengthening international cooperation against this crime. This commemoration is not just a day on the calendar. It's a time to recall that behind each statistic is a person, a man or a woman, a child that was used in order to make criminal profits. This year, the World Campaign is taking place around the topic of Trapped Behind the Scam, which is looking at one of the most dynamic forms of exploitation at the world level. Trafficking of persons with a view to forced crime using scams and fraud. For a long time, we talked about trafficking of person and we think about sexual trafficking or forced labor. But now, criminal organizations are constantly evolving and changing their business model. Today, we see that thousands of people are recruited through false jobs, advertisement, brought to other countries, and then forced through violence, threats, to participate in massive digital scam operations, romantic fraud and scams, and other crimes that are facilitated by technology. What started being very visible in Southeast Asia has now become a global threat. We have warned that these operations extend to other regions, including Latin America and the Caribbean. proving the capacity of adaptation of transnational organized criminals. That's why here I want to highlight an important issue. Increasingly, we're seeing situations where victims of trafficking are forced to commit crimes for their exploiters. In many cases, they're forced to participate in crimes online, or sometimes they're involved in drugs, crimes, theft, or other criminal activities promoted by criminal organizations. They usually act under coercion, abuse of their dignity, violence, or deception. And that's why UNODC, as the technical secretariat of the Transnational Organized Crime Convention and its protocols on trafficking persons, has been driving efforts to improve understanding trafficking of persons as a use of forced criminality. It requires specialized agents through justice systems throughout the region. The data recently collected by the UNODC shows regional activity, which shows experience in countries such as Mexico, Guatemala, and Peru, where currently we have been developing a project called TRAITS. This is working with the U.S. Department of State in the Office of Combating and Monitoring Trafficking of Persons. We're working with states to build capacity to investigate and prosecute traffickers of persons in keeping with international standards. This is how we hope that different bodies for regional cooperation, such as PRET and CORETI, and national teams, through our offices in almost 14 offices in the region, can work together to put in place action that will lead to states' capacity building to fight this crime. It's particularly important that in 2026, the Commission on Criminal Investigation of the United Nations adopted by consensus a resolution specifically on combating trafficking of persons with a view to using them as forced labor and crime. The victims are compelled through fraud, coercion, and force to participate in illegal activities such as fraud operations or other scams. Adoption of this resolution in the context of the United Nations is an important milestone. It reflects an international consensus and agreement on the need to understand this form of exploitation and provide protection of human rights and an approach that's victim-centered. Excellency, the Americas have an opportunity to work in a preventative manner right now. As these criminal modalities emerge, it's important to strengthen national normative frameworks to make sure that trafficking for the purposes of forced crime action can be punished. And that's why the UNODC is encouraging member states to consider legislative efforts to make it possible to specifically incorporate exploitation by way of forced criminality as a crime when it's not at this time defined as a crime in your legal framework. This will help to identify victims, provide for effective prosecution of the perpetrators, and provide for sanction of those people who have committed illegal acts, and also treat as victims those who were forced to do so because they were trafficked. This is important for judges, police, prosecutors, and other involved in law enforcement to work together in partnership with the private sector, especially with the technical and financial sectors, to have an early understanding of these criminal organizations. In this effort, the network of national authorities, such as PRET and CORETI, can be significant places to work together along these lines. If I may, let me conclude recalling that trafficking of persons is a crime that is constantly evolving, but the commitment to victims needs to remain unchanged. In this world of trafficking of persons, we need to collectively be determined to make sure that people are not exploited by organized crime. No person can be treated like a good or merchandise or forced to be deprived of their freedom to enrich others. This cooperation is important for hemispheric cooperation. We need to modernize our responses and make sure that the victims and those that are trapped behind scams online or other forms of forced labor can be identified and freed and assisted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perez, for your remarks and for the contributions shared in the context of this commemoration. I now request the Secretariat to project the video presentation by Ms. Danisa Ramirez, Chair of the Regional Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants. Please proceed.
En nombre de Guatemala y de la Secretaría.
On behalf of Guatemala and the Secretariat Against Sexual Violence, Exploitation, and Trafficking of Persons, in our capacity of Chair of the Regional Coalition Against the Trafficking of Persons and Illicit Trafficking of Migrants, CORDET, this day allows us to extend cordial greetings to the Chair of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, the OAS, Mr. Stephen Perol, Permanent Representative of the Commonwealth of Dominica. We'd also like to extend to the Chair through Honduras and the Vice Chair through the Dominican Republic of the 9th meeting of national authorities on trafficking of persons in the OAS. I should also like to extend cordial greetings to the delegations that are presented here in the Permanent Council of the OAS. Mr. Stephen Greener, Director of the Public Security Department of the OAS, Mr. Carlos Perez, Officer of the UNODC in the UN, and Madam Monica Javier, Chair of the Regional Platform Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants, PRET. On behalf of the Regional Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants, I'd like to express our gratitude for organizing this commemoration of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons in this space of the Permanent Council of the OAS. Moreover, from Coretti and on behalf of the countries that belong to this organization, we would like to thank the Chair and Vice Chair of the 9th meeting of national authorities on trafficking of persons of the OAS for providing follow-up on regional dialogue so that we can reflect on the importance of continuing working together in order to combat trafficking of persons. This is a crime which is a serious violation of human rights. It's a transnational crime which is complex and which is increasingly challenging to all states. Coretti is a regional body for technical cooperation. It's an interinstitutional cooperation body and provides a standing space for technical and political cooperation. It is made up of 9 countries: Belize, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, and the Dominican Republic. They are represented through their committees, coalitions, or national councils in the area of these crimes. It includes participation of members, observers from various organizations, international organizations, that also contribute their technical knowledge and cooperation. And this is in fulfillment of our line of action, the current plan of operation, and keeping with the various recommendations at the international level that were issued by the United Nations and other specialized organizations, such as this mechanism of the OAS, of the national authorities. We'd like to share here that Coretti is working on action to look at key areas for cooperation, to make it possible to continue coordinating efforts and joining efforts to make it possible to have an exchange of good practices and strengthen action undertaken in this context in the area of prevention, strengthening of attention to victims of these crimes, investigation, prosecution, amongst other efforts. We'd like to share that, including the most recent results that we've achieved in Coretti, I'd highlight the development of a regional report on the situation of trafficking of persons in the countries that belong to Coretti. That makes it possible to identify the most significant characteristics. And we see that internal trafficking dominates in most of the countries in our region. Digital exploitation of boys, girls, and adolescents, as well as gaps that were detected in investigations, are part of the significant key characteristics that we have identified and that we can work on together. Recently, CORET updated its action plan to improve regional coordination and coordination of efforts undertaken by combating digital crimes and by forming strategic partnerships regionally and internationally. An example of that would be PRET, the Ibero-American network of prosecutors against illegal trafficking of persons and smuggling of migrants, the National Conference for Migration, and the GROOM of Interinstitutional Cooperation Against Trafficking of Persons in the United Nations. Moreover, I'd like to share that given the need to improve protection and assistance for victims of trafficking of persons, CORET is now working on a process to build its first program for virtual training, which is aimed at first-line responders. And we'd like to be able to invite you to be part of this process at the end of this year. To commemorate the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons this year, the countries that are members of CORET had a date. If it's too good, it might be trafficking. And we'd also like to share that we will soon be presenting a basic guide of tips in order to identify trafficking of persons for the purposes of labor exploitation, in order to respond to emerging forms of trafficking of persons and the relationship with transnational organized crime. We'd like to say that CORET is at its third plenary meeting that will be held in Panama City this week. We are having a dialogue on the new dynamics of trafficking of persons. It's mostly focused on exploitation of victims, scams, the use of artificial intelligence and other technologies, and the links between these crimes with money laundering or laundering of other assets. And we'd like to underscore that the transnational nature of trafficking of persons requires coordinated efforts at the regional and international levels. And that's why CORET has consolidated a policy for national coordination, which is based on 3 pillars: strengthening, innovation of knowledge and training, and the exchange of good practices, and technical positioning and political positioning in order to comprehensively grapple with this crime and to provide technical assistance. We would reiterate our gratitude for this time provided to CORET during the Permanent Council's meeting. We wish you every success and best wishes to continue driving forward efforts to fight trafficking of persons in our hemisphere. Thank you.
I thank the Department of Public Security of the Secretariat for Multi-Dimensional Security for facilitating Ms. Ramirez's participation and request that our appreciation be conveyed to her for her contributions to this commemoration. I am now pleased to welcome and give the floor to Ms. Monica Xavier, Chair of the Regional Platform Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants. Ms. Xavier, welcome to the OAS Permanent Council. You have the floor for up to 7 minutes.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, one and all. We'd like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this meeting of the Permanent Council in the context of the commemoration of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. We are convinced of the importance of creating synergies between the agendas of the various mechanisms and to promote cooperation and dialogue regionally. This is especially true in the area of prevention and combating of this crime, as well as protection and comprehensive assistance for victims, and a new project on this topic. As you know, the PRET, the Regional Platform Against Trafficking of Persons and Smuggling of Migrants, is a mechanism that brings together the countries of South America geared to providing coordination of efforts, exchange of information, and coordinated action to combat these crimes. This year, Uruguay assumed the pro tempore chairmanship, and it is putting in place its annual program of action. It wants to bring coordinated work along with the ongoing dialogue with the Technical Secretariat of PRET, which is exercised jointly with the National Organization of the International Organization of Migrants and UNODC of the UN. The pro tempore chair has provided virtual exchanges on the trafficking of women and teenagers and possible situations involving trafficking of persons. It's aimed at sharing experiences and progress achieved by member states in this area. In the area of mutual collaboration, we set up a work plan with the Regional Office of UN Women for the Americas and the Caribbean, with technical assistance from the UN, which will make it possible to move forward with the regional plan geared at identifying evidence on the relationship between the disappearance of women and adolescents. And the relationship between their disappearance and trafficking. We also identified information exchanges, methodology is shared, and institutional know-how is shared. We're also proposing to make progress in identifying experiences and good practices in 24-hour shelters involved in fighting trafficking, and also looking at situations of countries in terms of the territorialization of national policies. We're also working at the subnational level on these same issues. We're making progress in the area of developing tools for the purposes of investigation, both of assets and technology. The tools of experiences and recommendations in order to create specialized prosecutor's office to prosecute the crime of trafficking of persons. We're working with the Regional Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons and Smuggling of Migrants, CORETE, with a view to having a PRET-CORET memorandum of understanding to work together. Another challenge that we have before us includes identifying new trends, such as the significant increase of social networks, the use of messaging, and fake job offers, and digital exploitation, and those that are refugees.
Modalidades de explotación.
The diversification of operating modalities such as illicit surrogacy, illicit appropriation of children for adoption, as well as the different modalities of exploitation for criminal purposes, forced criminal purposes, such as the commission of scams, hitmen, or for combat in the area of war, among other things. The use of cryptocurrencies and digital platforms to hide payments and ill-gotten gains. A major challenge we face at the regional and global level is to work together with the financial system in the fight against trafficking and exploitation of people. Highlight the importance to work with public banks as well as with the private sector to improve the detection of money laundering will undoubtedly help defend the human rights of victims and survivors of human trafficking and prosecute the trafficked. Analyzing the money route and money laundering is an essential activity in the crimes of exploitation of people because criminal networks need to collect, move, and clean the profits, which leaves financial footprints. This makes the financial system at an early detection point and allows you to go to the center of the problem. If you manage to freeze accounts and requisition assets and goods, the networks lose their financing and therefore its business capacity. On the other hand, when the path of the persecution is only through victims and survivors, in general, it is not or doesn't reach the main traffickers, but moves to intermediaries who are those who you know. and they are the higher-uppers in the organization. And then finally, the fragmented nature for the victims and survivors also is a risk factor when it comes to the different human rights and the systematic approach of the damage that is caused because of multiple forms of violence. These things make up biographies in which the accumulation of affectation challenges and has a bearing on the integral action of states at national and international levels. For this, it is essential that the states continue to work on the approach focused on the victims with a gender perspective, generations, and intersectionality, and also with interculturality in mind. For the above, there is the need to deepen cooperation that persists on the regional level. Cross-border, sub-regional, regional, and international cooperation, promoting exchange of information to address and combat human trafficking and trafficking of illegal migrants, considering the particularities of the border areas, the migratory flows, and the differences between national regulatory frameworks. We reiterate our commitment to continue working in an articulated way, convinced that through regional cooperation, we will be able to provide answers that are effective and sustainable.
Ms. Harvey, the additional minute to conclude.
Microphone, please, for the speaker. Microphone, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So we would like to conclude, and once again, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity for this dialogue that convenes us on this day, and we renew Uruguay's willingness to remain an active partner on this shared agenda. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, Ms. Xavier, for your remarks and for your contribution within the context of this commemoration. At this time, and in accordance with the exceptions set off in Article 46 bis of the Rules of Procedure, I give the floor to the delegation of Honduras for the reading of a joint statement by the Chair and Vice Chair of the 9th meeting of the National Authorities on Trafficking in Persons. The delegation of Honduras, you now have the floor for 3 minutes.
Okay. Muy buenos días.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Declaration of the Chair and Vice Chair of the 9th meeting of National Authorities on Trafficking in Persons to the OAS Permanent Council of the Organization of American States on the occasion of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. The delegations of Honduras and the Dominican Republic, in their capacity as Chair and Vice Chair of the 9th meeting of National Authorities on Trafficking in Persons, respectively, join in the commemoration of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, held on July 30th, and urge all member states of the organization to renew their commitment to preventing and combating this crime, as well as with the protection and comprehensive assistance of victims. This year, the global campaign is being developed under the theme, Trapped Behind the Scam, which draws attention to a growing form of human trafficking. The use of deception, particularly through digital media, using false job offers and seemingly legitimate opportunities to recruit people who are subsequently subjected to different forms of exploitation, including forced criminality. Behind these scams operate criminal organizations that resort to digital fraud and deceptive recruitment to exploit people in forced criminality schemes, forcing them through violence and threats to participate in illicit activities such as online scams, cyber fraud, drug transport, robbery, and other crimes. As a result, these individuals could be prosecuted as criminals rather than being recognized as victims of human trafficking, limiting their access to protection and justice. In this scenario, we reiterate the importance of strengthening the identification of victims and applying the principle of non-criminalization, especially recognizing those cases in which they have been forced to commit crimes.
To conclude,
Thus, we would like to call for consolidation of comprehensive and victim-centered responses and for strengthening regional and international cooperation to investigate and dismantle criminal networks operating inside and outside our region. Honduras and the Dominican Republic reaffirm before all those present here their commitment to continue promoting the implementation of international and regional instruments to prevent and combat trafficking in persons in the context of the World Day Against Trafficking in Persons. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Delegation of Honduras, for this statement. The Delegation of Paraguay, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the delegation of Paraguay, that is the leader of the Group of 10, we are honored to take the floor at this time to thank the delegations of Honduras and the Dominican Republic in their respective capacities as chair and vice chair of the 9th meeting of national authorities on trafficking in persons to promote this opportunity for a dialogue. We also truly appreciate the presentations of the panelists, and we recognize the work of the specialized sub-regional mechanisms and the General Secretariat here. Trafficking in persons is one of the most heinous crimes of human rights and a particular manifestation which is particularly cruel when it comes to international transnational crime. It works against freedom, dignity, and the integrity of all people. And it disproportionately affects women, children, as well as younger children, adolescents, migrants, and other people who are very vulnerable. The topic that brings us together this year, Trapped Behind the Scam, underscores a growing trend. False offers of work and promise to better opportunities facilitated by social networks and message text, and in certain cases, the victims are subjected to violence, threats, or coercion to force them to participate in fraud and scams online or other illicit behavior. And this reality calls us to an urgent challenge for justice systems and our protections. The same technologies that are used by criminal networks can contribute to prevent the crime, to detect the way they capture people, and to support investigation. And for that, it is necessary to strengthen technical capacity and promote effective cooperation amongst the justice authorities, security, migration, and labor, as well as labor protection with civil society and the private sector, as well as academia. We have to look at the profitability of these sectors as well, the opportune exchange of information, police or law enforcement, as well as financial intelligence is crucial to identify the suspect flows and come down on illicit flows and those who benefit from exploiting humans. Group 10 underscores the importance of having trustworthy and comparable data that can slash this under registration. And we have to look at the routes, evaluate public policies that are geared towards using resources properly. So within that framework, we truly value follow-up of recommendation 24 of the 8th meeting of authorities, the articulation and coordination amongst the regional mechanisms and the sub-regional specialized ones, as well as the judges and prosecutors networks, is an opportunity to deepen cooperation, share good practices, improve the collection and analysis of data. So, Mr. Chairman, no state can address this crime by itself, and that is why we affirm the commitment with a hemispheric, across-the-board coordinated response based on human rights, which calls for effective cooperation and unbridled respect for human dignity. We would like to have this commemoration geared with actions that prevent caption and to go back to giving victims their human rights and punish the responsible and bring down the networks that sustain these criminals. Thank you very much.
Thank you, delegation. I notice Suriname. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the current chair of the CARICOM Caucus of Ambassadors, Her Excellency Elizabeth Darius Clark. The countries of CARICOM join the international community today in solemnly observing World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, focused on the theme Trapped Behind the Scam, and wish to thank the Permanent Council for convening this important discussion. We also take this opportunity to recognize the invaluable work undertaken across our hemisphere, and particularly within the OAS, to strengthen cooperation in addressing this issue. Human trafficking, whether it is for sexual exploitation, forced labor, or any other form of modern-day slavery, represents a grave violation of the human rights of our people, and that should not be ignored, tolerated, or underestimated. In the Caribbean, this crisis is intensified by porous maritime borders and economic vulnerabilities, turning the region into a critical transit point and destination. Eradicating it requires a unified strategy that penalizes complicit individuals and businesses, closes legal loopholes, and provides long-term protection for survivors. For a small island and low-lying coastal states, the rapid digitalization of our economies has outpaced our regulatory frameworks, opening a vacuum that transnational criminal networks are aggressively exploiting. We are not just dealing with isolated cybercrimes. We are facing a sophisticated, digitalized assault on human dignity. Criminal syndicates use online platforms to bypass physical borders, transforming the internet into a marketplace where the most vulnerable among us can be sold to the highest bidder. Within the region, poverty, inequality, migration, violence, and the impacts of natural disasters and climate-related displacement have heightened the vulnerability of our citizens. Digital exploitation and the increase in online scams present a significant threat to unsuspecting persons, with women and children disproportionately affected, falling victim to online recruitment, grooming, and exploitation. Consequently, regional authorities are taking decisive action to educate the public and provide essential protective tools. We take this opportunity to recognize and applaud the work of the Caribbean Coalition Against Trafficking in Persons, which has become a pillar of hope across the region by uniting government agencies, law enforcement, and civil society to dismantle human trafficking networks. Chair, CARICOM firmly asserts that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue, but a critical pillar of our collective, multidimensional security. A secure Americas cannot leave any one individual exposed to digital predators. We call on our partners to work together to deliver concrete actions in combating human trafficking in all its forms. It is through strengthened legislation, interagency collaboration, victim-centered care, and regional cooperation that we can build more
Thank you, delegation of Suriname.
Do I have an additional minute, Chair?
Okay, we'll grant you the additional meeting. For once, I thought you were just concluding at the end of the clock. Please proceed.
Okay. CARICOM firmly asserts that cybersecurity is no longer just a technical issue, but a critical pillar of our collective multidimensional security. On this World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, CARICOM stands in solidarity with survivors, honors the tireless efforts of frontline responders, and renews its call for justice, protection, and dignity for all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, delegation of Suriname. With this, we conclude this commemoration. I wish to express appreciation to the delegation of Honduras for this initiative, as well as to all speakers and delegations for their contributions and presentations. As the next item on the other paper, and pursuant to the request submitted by the delegation of Canada, I consult the Council on whether there is agreement to approve the draft resolution entitled 7th Meeting of the Working Group on Cooperation and Conference Building Measures in Cyberspace, contained in document CP/DOC 6243/26. If there are no objections, the draft resolution is approved. We will now proceed with the consideration of the draft resolutions submitted by the Chair of the Committee on Juridical and Political Affairs in accordance with the request reflected in document CP/INF 11006/26. For this purpose, I give the floor to the Chair of the CAJP for a brief presentation on these draft resolutions. Ambassador Cordero, you have the floor.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much for giving me the floor to greet the chair and the colleagues and representatives here as member states and permanent observers, the Assistant Secretary General, and the civil servants who are here today, as well as the representatives of civil society organizations who are here this morning, and other social actors and government civil servants and citizens who are following this session from our countries. As chair of the CAJP, I would like to thank the chair for your kindness in having given us the opportunity to incorporate in this regular session the 3 draft resolutions that were cited on the agenda on issues that are of interest to the OAS. I would also like to thank delegations who have shared their comments or concerns on the draft resolutions, because this has helped us to have the criteria from member states on those issues. In this regard, then, I would like to ask the chair, given the fact that we have received comments from some delegations on these drafts, I quote, celebration of the 9th Ministerial Meeting of Digital Government of the Americas and the 20th Annual Meeting of the Inter-American Network of Digital Governments in documents CP/CAJP/3906/26 and the draft holding the 12th Annual Meeting of the Inter-American Network of Registries and Land Registries in document CP/CAJP/3907/26. And just so that we can generate and have more opportunities for consideration thereof, these will be circulated to the CAJP to deepen the dialogue on both of these texts at another session down the line. and so that we can agree to them in a timely fashion. Not having received any comments on the draft resolution holding the 20th Annual Conference of the Inter-American Network of Government Procurement and the American Forum of Public Procurement for Innovation contained in document CP/CAJP 3905/26, given that this refers to two very important events, and one of them is going to be held next week in Mexico. This chair would like to request through you support of delegations so that this draft resolution is approved today by acclamation. Mr. Chairman, this chair has been interested in bringing to delegations edification, holding inter-American events on a high level when it comes to government procurement, digital government, and land registries of property to encourage people to participate, as well as to look at the Department for effective work. And we'd like to thank them for their efforts. Irrespective of whether or not we get approval of the 3 or 4 mentioned resolutions today, it would be ideal, but we would like to finish the objective and to highlight for all member states those events. And in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, in designing the work plan and drafting it, as well as the schedule of activities of the CAJP for 2026-2027, this chair is committed to open up an opportunity so that we can have a follow-up on the reports and recommendations of the different meetings described in the 3 draft resolutions that we are presenting to this permanent council, with a view to duly informing the General Assembly of the OAS in its 57th regular session, and if possible, negotiate mandates for this body that will continue to encourage and support the work that the General Secretariat does and other bodies of the organization, from which our governments and citizens benefit, thus supporting ongoing actions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your presentation as chair, in your capacity as chair of the CAJP. Based on the information presented, and given that the draft resolutions entitled Holding the 9th Ministerial Meeting on Digital Government of the Americas and the 12th Annual Meeting of the Inter-American Network on Digital Government, contained in document CP/CAJP 3906/26, and holding of the 12th Conference of the Annual Assembly in the Inter-American Network for the Candidature and Property Registry, contained in document CP/CAJP 3907/26 Rev 1, have received proposed amendments from the delegation. The chair proposes that these 2 draft resolutions be referred to the Committee on Juridical and Political Affairs for further consideration by the member states. If there are no objections, it is so agreed. Regarding the draft resolution entitled Holding of the 12th Annual Conference on the Inter-American Network on Government Procurement and the Ibero-American Forum on Public Procurement of Innovation, contained in document CP/CAJP 3905/26, I consult the Council on whether it agrees to approve this draft resolution. Seeing no objections, the draft resolution is approved. We will now proceed with the elections of the chair of the working group of the General Committee established by the Permanent Council at its regular meeting of May 6 pursuant to Article 13 and 24 of the Rules of Procedures to examine the OAS strategic plan for 2026 to 2030. The working group has been mandated to submit a proposed strategic plan to the Permanent Council for its consideration no later than December 31, 2026, in accordance with the General Assembly Resolution 3053, adopted at its most recent regular session in Panama. In this connection, I wish to inform the Council that the candidacy of Ms. Catalina Vera, alternate representative of Chile, has been submitted by the delegation of Paraguay in its capacity as coordinator of the regional group G10. I now offer the floor to the delegations. I recognize the delegation of Paraguay.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the delegation of Paraguay, which is currently responsible for coordination of the G10 regional coordination, we're honored to present the candidature of Madam Catalina Regatoro, alternate representative of the Republic of Chile to the OAS, for the chair of the working group of the committee responsible for looking at the OAS strategic plan for 2026 to 2030, and to bring a proposal to the Permanent Council at the latest of December 31. In keeping with Resolution 2053 of the General Assembly, Madam Ubeda is a magistrate in public administration at the Adolfo Ibáñez University. She also has a diploma in science for design of public policy from the same university. Moreover, in addition to her diplomatic training and career between 2019 to 20, before joining the diplomatic corps, Madame Vera worked for 6 years in the Assistant Secretariat of Communications for Chile, where she worked as an advisor for the cabinet of the Undersecretary and was responsible for development, design, and management of the National Plan for Digital Infrastructure for Chile. She coordinated initiatives with more than 10 different public ministries and institutions for projects of investment in infrastructure in the country, which shows her substantive experience in strategic planning and management of national scale projects. Since 2023, she has worked as alternate representative of Chile to the OAS, where she has led negotiations in the area of migration, multidimensional security, the rights of women, amongst other issues. She also was involved in modifications, regulations of the organizations, committees, and bodies. She's worked for the Inter-American Committee on Integral Development, the Inter-American Commission on Women, Hemispheric Security, and various working groups in the context of the CAJP. She also participated as a negotiator in the area of cybersecurity with the United Nations. Chair, Group 10 trusts that the combination of her sound training in both economics and strategic planning and her vast experience in managing complex multi-sectorial projects and her deep-seated knowledge of multilateral negotiations in the context of the OAS make alternate Representative Vera an ideal candidate for having the spirit of consensus, the technical rigor, and ability to negotiate the strategic plan for 2026 to 2030. Thank you.
I now grant the floor to the delegation of Costa Rica.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, sir. The delegation of Costa Rica is honored to second the candidature of Madame Vera as the alternate representative of Chile and represented by the put forth by the distinguished delegation of Paraguay to chair the committee responsible for examining the OAS strategic plan for 2026 to 2030. Costa Rica expressed its full endorsement of this candidature. We have had an opportunity to work with Madame Vera and know her professionalism, her dialogue capacity, and her firm commitment to the principles that underpin this organization. We are convinced that under her leadership, the working group will have an open mind and clearly oriented towards results in their work. We reiterate our support for this candidature, and we would request that it be seconded or approved by acclamation. Thank you very much, sir.
I now recognize the delegation of Chile.
Ahí sí. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to all the delegations, and especially those who seconded the trust placed in my colleague Caterina Vena as the head of mission. I'd like to thank all of you and say that she will not be alone in this process. Of course, she will be accompanied by and supported by the entire mission. Thank you very much, and we wish you every success for good planning for the OAS. Thank you.
Thank you, delegation of Chile. Although Mrs. Vera could not join us today, I extend my sincere congratulations on her elections as chair of the working group of the General Committee to examine the OAS strategic plan for 2026 to 2030. We are confident that under her leadership, the working group will successfully fulfill its mandate and contribute to the strengthening of our organization. As the next item, I consult the Council as to whether there is agreement to approve the minutes of meetings 2479 to 2488 held in January, February, and March 2024. Approved. We now move to item 7, farewell to Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vegas, Permanent Representative of Colombia. Madam Assistant Secretary General, distinguished ambassadors and permanent representatives, dear friends, dear friend Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vegas, ladies and gentlemen. Today, this Permanent Council bids farewell to an exceptional jurist, a steadfast defender of human dignity, and a distinguished public servant, Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vegas, Permanent Representative of Colombia. We look back with profound respect and appreciation upon his tenure, and particularly upon his leadership as chair of this council during the first quarter of 2026. Since assuming his duties as Permanent Representative of Colombia in September 23, 2022, Ambassador Vargas has brought to the council, true to his lifelong vocation as a constitutional magistrate and advocate for human rights, a profound commitment to social justice, inclusion, and the protection of human dignity. Throughout his tenure, Ambassador Vargas contributed to ensuring that this council continued to amplify the voice of those who have historically faced exclusion and marginalization. He consistently promoted a comprehensive hemispheric agenda that advanced the rights of women, the protection and empowerment of indigenous peoples, and the recognition that inclusion of Afro-descendant peoples and communities. He reminded us that multilateralism derives its true meaning when it responds to the realities of our societies, addresses inequality, and remains connected to the aspirations and needs of those peoples of the Americas. Ambassador Vargas, on behalf of the member states represented in this council, I wish to express our deepest gratitude for your wisdom, your unwavering dedication to justice and human rights, and your tireless efforts to strengthen our organization and bring it closer to the citizens that we serve. We will greatly miss your thoughtful contributions, your spirit of collaboration, and your commitment to dialogue. However, your legacy of inclusion, dignity, and justice will continue to resonate in these halls. We wish you every success in your future endeavors, together with our sincere appreciation and highest consideration. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, in accordance with Article 8F of the Rules of Procedure, during farewell tributes to the permanent representatives, the floor may be taken, in addition to this chair, only by coordinators of regional groups. Accordingly, it is my pleasure to offer the floor to the representatives of these groups so that they may join in this recognition. The chair recognizes the delegation of Uruguay.
Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. It is my honor to be taking the floor on behalf of the Group 10 regional group. In addition to your words, Ambassador Silva culminated as ambassador to Colombia. It now touches us to be bidding farewell to a simple but wonderful person who contributed to this organization, who left a significant mark on those of us who had the pleasure of working with him in this hemispheric organization. Since he arrived at the OAS in 2022, Ambassador Vargas was very firmly convinced and based on firm convictions, worked based on the Constitution of Colombia. Also, he worked prior in the Inter-American Committee on Human Rights, where I also had the honor of sharing those efforts with the ambassador a few years. These experiences, his experience, were reflected in each of his statements and his ongoing defense of the Inter-American system of defending human rights. Mr. Vargas, through his mission, drove through an agenda that's committed to multilateralism, the quest for consensus, and the strengthening of an organization that's capable of meeting the challenges which our hemisphere currently faces. His leadership of the Permanent Council as the chair was also characterized by his ability to grapple with particularly complex moments and challenges. He was always cordial and respectful, and his openness all contributed to strengthening the dialogue between member states, qualities that were broadly recognized by all delegations. Chair, we have worked along with Ambassador Vargas, and so we know firsthand his extraordinary human qualities. And I'd just like to highlight a couple of major characteristics. His efforts to protect human dignity in its broadest conception. To no one is unaware of this, and you mentioned it yourself, Mr. Chairman. He always exhibited extraordinary sensitivity to the situation of the most vulnerable groups and people that are the most disenfranchised in the Americas. Knowing his taste for literature, we can consider him a sentient thinker, the definition that was reserved by the famous writer for those who can think and talk at the same time, that speak from their hearts and from their reason, that do not split mind from the body or emotion from reason. I'd also like to highlight his active role in the space where he renewed dynamics and a vision that favored rich cultural exchanges and cooperation between permanent members by promoting Spanish literature, movies, and culture. We'd like to most sincerely recognize him for his dedication, for his friendship, and his significant contribution to this organization through his work. Ambassador Vargas, your departure will leave a mark on all of us for a long time, but we're sure that you will continue bringing your vast experience and your vast commitment to the service of human rights and commitment to democracy to your new endeavors as it characterized your entire trajectory here. We wish you and your family the best success in this new stage of your life. Thank you.
Thank you, delegation of Uruguay. The chair recognizes the delegation of Belize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have the honor to take the floor on behalf of the countries of Central America and the Dominican Republic, member states of the Central American Integration System represented at the OAS. As Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vargas concludes his distinguished tenure as permanent representative of Colombia, we wish to express our sincere appreciation for his service and steadfast commitment to the work of this organization. Throughout his time at the OAS, Ambassador Vargas has demonstrated professionalism, wisdom, and a genuine spirit of dialogue. We recall with great respect Ambassador Vargas's tenure as chair of the Permanent Council. His principled leadership contributed meaningfully to the deliberations of the Permanent Council and have strengthened cooperation among our delegations. Colombia has long been an important partner to our region, and Ambassador Vargas has further reinforced those close ties through his constructive approach and personal warmth. And over the years, we had lots of opportunities to cover common ground. As a fierce champion of human rights, he was always ready to both lead and/or offer support on those issues when the rights of the most vulnerable were being endangered or were being trampled. We certainly will miss his wisdom, his candor, and his willingness to speak passionately and eloquently on the issues he considered important. Pero más allá del señor embajador,
But beyond being ambassador, I'd also like to recognize him as my friend, Luis Ernesto. That friend that always reminded me when I had forgotten my coat in the winter. That Colombian, that poet, who became the protagonist and personified the various personalities of the poems that he loved to recite when the spirit of the artist took him over. And we will remember him always with a smile on our face and remembering his greeting. How are you today, little brother?
Central America and the Dominican Republic, we extend our deepest gratitude to Ambassador Vargas for his friendship and collaboration. We wish him every success in his future endeavors and trust that his dedication to diplomacy and regional cooperation will continue to serve our hemisphere well. Que le vaya muy bien, querido.
Dear friend, may things go well for you.
Thank you, delegation of Belize. Chair recognizes the delegation of Suriname.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the current chair of the CARICOM Caucus of Ambassadors, Her Excellency Elizabeth Darius Clark. The CARICOM Caucus of Ambassadors welcomes the opportunity to recognize and bid adieu to a dear friend and colleague on the conclusion of 4 years of distinguished service here at the OAS. As permanent representative of Colombia to the OAS, Ambassador Luis Ernesto Vargas demonstrated his commitment to multilateralism and diplomacy as key tools in uniting our hemisphere. A lawyer by profession, Ambassador Vargas brought a wealth of experience and deep-rooted integrity to the work of the organization, particularly in his areas of passion, such as environmental protection, human rights and advocacy for the most vulnerable in our societies. The Caribbean community has been privileged to benefit from Ambassador Vargas' continued commitment to justice, constitutional democracy, and human rights. We thank him for his many contributions to building a more sustainable and inclusive Americas, for his efforts in ensuring that climate change and environmental protection remains human rights focused, and for his unwavering dedication to an agenda that promotes the rights of vulnerable populations, particularly Afro-descendant people. We are especially grateful for the dedication of the Permanent Mission of Colombia under the stewardship of Ambassador Vargas to advancing the draft Inter-American Declaration on the Rights of Persons and Peoples of African Descent. Ambassador Vargas, while you will be remembered for your distinguished career and your ability to balance a rigorously demanding work agenda, it is your openness to dialogue, genuine disposition, and friendly persona to all that has left an enduring mark on us collectively. This quality reminds us that while artful negotiation skills are necessary in diplomacy, it is equally important to build trust and lasting relationships. The CARICOM Caucus thanks you for your leadership, your friendship, and your commitment to the principles of our organization. We wish you the very best success in this new chapter and send you off knowing that whatever path you now journey will be deeply enriched by your wisdom and presence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Delegation of Suriname. The Chair now recognizes the Delegation of Canada.
Thank you, Chair. It's a privilege today to take the floor to recognize and bid farewell to Ambassador Vargas of Colombia as he concludes his tenure here at the Organization of American States. Throughout his time at the OAS, Ambassador Vargas distinguished himself through his professionalism, wisdom, and his various leadership roles, including here as the chair of the Permanent Council, and through his unwavering commitment to the work of this organization. His deep knowledge and expertise enriched our discussions and greatly contributed to the quality of our deliberations. Through his thoughtful interventions, balanced perspective, and ability to navigate complex issues, helped us to advance dialogue and foster greater understanding amongst member states. Ambassador Vargas demonstrated an ability to build bridges amongst member states and foster a spirit of collaboration. Colombia's collaborative approach, guided by Ambassador Vargas, and its willingness to engage constructively with diverse perspectives have been instrumental in advancing discussions and strengthening mutual understanding within our community. Colombia's meaningful engagement on key institutional matters reflected a strong commitment to the organization and its priorities. Under Ambassador Vargas's leadership, Colombia played an active and constructive role in the work of the Committee on Administrative and Budgetary Affairs. Ambassador Vargas consistently approached these discussions with dedication, pragmatism, and a clear focus on achieving positive outcomes for the organization. Colombia's contributions during budget negotiations were invaluable, and Ambassador Vargas worked tirelessly to promote dialogue, encourage compromise, and bring delegations together in pursuit of consensus. His efforts helped to create the conditions necessary to reach agreement and to move forward on important priorities. As Ambassador Vargas concludes his tenure, we extend our sincere appreciation for his dedication, collegiality, and many valuable contributions to the OAS. He has left a positive and lasting impact and will be remembered as a constructive colleague, a respected leader, and a trusted partner. Embajador Vargas, muchísimas gracias.
Ambassador, thank you very much. We wish you the very best.
Thank you, Delegation of Canada. Thank you all coordinators of regional coordinators for your contributions. At this stage, I now have the honor to give the floor to Ambassador Vargas. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Colombia, en el que
According to a report, a priest in Colombia, Francisco de Ruiz, on behalf of the Committee on Truth, was assassinated. More than 400,000 Colombians were murdered in a relatively short period of time. And paradoxically, at the same time, the world was told that we were living in a democracy. I come from a country where a political movement was eradicated until it reached genocide, a country very much condemned by the Inter-American System of Human Rights, where 4 candidates for presidency were assassinated, and where today we continue to see pre-candidates being assassinated. It's a country where more than 8 million people were displaced, and where hundreds of thousands of rural or farmers were stripped of their lands, blood and fire, where more than 7,800 young people were assassinated. They were presented as dead guerrilla warriors, but in fact they were false positives. That is why Colombia deserves to be carefully observed, because this hate speech, stigmatization, and political violence have left on us a mark which is too painful. And unfortunately, there are things that it looks like we might be going back to that era. Chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Cibarón. Permanent Representative Dominica. First, I wish you every success during this session as you chair the Council. Madam Assistant Secretary General Laura Hill, Excellencies, permanent representatives, permanent observers, and distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends. I appear before the Permanent Council today with a feeling of gratitude for the privilege of having represented Colombia in the main political fora of the hemisphere. I take this opportunity to share some thoughts about the place that Colombia wanted to occupy in the Inter-American system in the last 4 years. The OAS has built its work on 4 inseparable pillars: democracy, human rights, multidimensional security, and integral development. These are not independent agendas. A democracy that doesn't guarantee rights loses its legitimacy. One that doesn't protect life ends up weakening institutions. And development is only sustainable when it reaches those who were historically disenfranchised. That orients the action of the president of the last 4 years. In the area of democracy, Colombia defended multilateralism as the natural place to combat the common challenges of the America. But I'd like to issue a warning here and make a request. Democracy is now facing new risks. It's not enough now to protect the right to vote. We need to guarantee that the votes do not end up being replaced by algorithms, by manipulation, digital manipulation, or new forms of manipulation that threaten the people's will. Democracy needs to continue belonging to the citizens. Human rights also occupy a central place in the policies of President Pietro. We've shown that it's possible to preserve the right to protest without making the state's response in an exercise of repression. Over the last 4 years, there were dozens of citizen marches and demonstrations, many convened by the opposition, to question the government's policies. And yet, there were no mutilated students by being fired upon. We did not see the unleashed violence against those who were exercising their constitutional right to demonstrate. That difference needs to always be recalled. Our country formally reports that some 4.5 million Colombians emerged from monetary poverty and reached the lowest level of poor in some decades. Behind that number, there are millions of people that recovered an opportunity and were able to more fully exercise their rights. We also achieved the greatest coverage for higher education in our entire history. And we made progress in giving lands back to many farmers, returning to the peasants what had been stripped from them by criminal organizations. And today, those rural people are being threatened, they're being tortured, and they are constantly under threat of being removed from their lands that had been given to them by the state itself. A country which is beginning to find reconciliation, just as Colombia was beginning to be reconciled, looked at the land and saw it as a way of working the rural people and the seized assets that were taken from the mafia were given back to them in the interest of the public. Let's not let Colombia lose that ground that was gained. Multidimensional security cannot be confused within states with repression. If we go back to considering the peasant as an internal enemy or domestic enemy, if we respond to protests with violence and we abandon that and use militarization, we will be repeating the errors of the past that caused so much pain to Colombia and to our entire region. The efforts undertaken by Colombia in the area of intelligence, international cooperation, and combating illegal economies made it possible to achieve results that were unprecedented. Over the last 4 years, 3,300,000 kilos of cocaine were confiscated. They never reached the streets to destroy more lives. That's a quantity that's equivalent of the total amount seized during the 3 prior governments. But what's most important here is that those results were achieved without making the peasant or farmer an enemy of the state. Public action was geared to criminal structures, and it was not aimed at those who for decades were victims of drug trafficking. There were no peasants that were massacred during the seizures and confiscations I just mentioned. Colombia achieved the greatest coverage for higher education of its entire history. As I mentioned, more than 2,700,000 students were registered in university, and some 450,000 young people benefited from the policy of free education. The speaker was cut off, notes the interpreter.
No hay política pública.
There is no public policy that's more transformative than that of opening the doors of education, which is the safest path to reducing inequality. Let us not forget, please, that 25% of the population is waiting, is expecting, and they continue in poverty. And that should be the work of all of us, our focus. In Colombia, not all of our goals were achieved. Fundamental issues such as reforming the healthcare system, political reform, reform of the tax system, to seek more tax equity did not find support in the Congress. The opposition decided to prevent these in a number of applications based on the regulatory quorum that would stop these initiatives. And rather than engaging in the democratic discussion that were expected by the country, under my leadership, I would say many things were not possible and would not have been possible without the Secretary General's contributions. The contribution of the delegations that are present here today. Without the extraordinary team of civil servants in the OAS and the mission that I had the honor of representing, whose dedication deserves my most profound acknowledgement. And if I may, Chair, I'd like to conclude with a thought. In these 4 years, President Gustavo Petro taught many Colombians to look at their country once again with hope, to recognize it as a world power for life and a country of beauty. And that led to millions of tourists who revitalized our national economy. He reminded us that Colombia is not condemned to being defined just by violence, but rather also by the wealth of its diversity, its culture, its biodiversity, and the ability of its people to build peace. And that is why I would like to make a special request to all of you, all the states represented here today. Please, don't forget Colombia. Set your eyes on Colombia and don't lose it from your sight, the country that renounced peace and exacerbation of violence. Because if the Colombians respond to hate speech that we've seen recently, and if repression comes back and replaces dialogue, if violence goes back to replacing democracy and the exercise of rights, not only will the future of our country, Colombia, be at stake, but also the hope of millions of Colombians will be at stake. Colombians that had begun to believe that changing history is possible. Colombia will therefore continue to find in this organization an indispensable place for dialogue and the defense of the values that we share. And I'd just like to finish by recalling the words of our Nobel laureate, Garcia Marquez, that I know you all know, because those condemned after 100 years of solitude will not have a second opportunity on this earth. That this not be the lot that awaits Colombia. The inter-American system must continue accompanying and supporting our country so that never again can violence, hate, and exclusion come back to take away that second opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Vegas. Please accept our appreciation and our very best wishes for your success in your future endeavors. We will now proceed with the last item on the agenda, other business. Before offering the floor to delegations, I would like to give the floor to the Assistant Secretary General so that she may provide the Council with further details regarding the new conference system implemented in this room, which we had the opportunity to inaugurate today. Madam Assistant Secretary General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair.
As you said at the very beginning of this meeting, I would like to inform the Council on the implementation of the new conference system in this very iconic room, Freedom Fighter Simon Bolivar. On 2025 August, this Permanent Council authorized up to $200,000 to replace the conference system that, after many, many years of service, had come to the end of its shelf life. And in compliance with this mandate, the Department of Conference and Meetings Management, in close cooperation with the Department of Procurement and Supervision of all management processes, put in a public, transparent, competitive bid that ended up selecting AV3 to put in the new system. The equipment was received in May this year, and once the General Assembly in Panama was concluded, our technical team installed, configured, and did the necessary testing to ensure a ordered transition and guarantee that our council meetings could go on, and so that the other political bodies could also meet here. The implementation of this system represents progress, significant progress in terms of the modernization of the tools that the General Secretariat has and makes available to all member states for carrying out their work. This investment is strengthening the institutional capacity of the OAS and allows us to have a more modern platform, one that is safe, trustworthy, efficient, and in keeping with the needs of political bodies and these standards for their deliberations. Now, as part of our permanent ongoing commitment for accountability and transparency, in the next meeting of the CAP, I will present a detailed report on the use of the authorized resources for this system. I should like to conclude by expressing my acknowledgement of the Department of Conferences and Meetings Management for their having accompanied us during the purchase, as well as the entire technical team. Thank you all very much. I'd like to also thank the Department of Conference and Meetings Management, the professionalism of which and their commitment made it possible to successfully implement this project. This result reflects the value of coordinated work amongst the various areas of the General Secretariat and our common commitment to continue to strengthen the capacity of the organization for the services of our states. And I would like to thank all of those who accompanied me in this report to the end of the meeting and the item that we had. Once again, the best of success, Ambassador Vargas. I wish you a lot of good health and success in your future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary General. I would like to once again congratulate you and your team for this important achievement and for the dedication and work devoted to strengthening the facilities and technical support available to this council. I think we all experienced the new equipment. I particularly like the signal for the completion of presentations and to ensure that we maintain the time limit. I think that deserves a round of applause to Ambassador and her team. Let's give that grant a round of applause. I will now offer the floor to delegations wishing to raise matters of a strictly informational nature. I wish to remind delegates that pursuant to Article 45C of the Rules of Procedure, interventions under this item shall be limited to matters of strictly informational nature. The Chair will call to order any intervention that exceeds that scope. I also recall that matters of substantive nature may be addressed through the appropriate procedures established in the Rules of Procedure, including their timely inclusion on the agenda for a regular meeting, for the convening of a special meeting, or consideration by the relevant committees of the Council. The floor is now open. Before concluding this meeting, I would like to remind delegations that the special meeting of the Permanent Council to consider the situation in Nicaragua will take place in this room at 2:30 p.m. There being no further requests for the floor, I thank all delegations for their participation. The meeting is now adjourned.